Unfortunately, the locals always had a habit of picking on strangers, which he was. When he finished his drink, he found his horse had been stolen. He went back into the bar, handily flipped his gun into the air, caught it above his head without even looking, and fired a shot into the ceiling. "Which one of you sidewinders stole my horse?" he yelled with surprising forcefulness. No one answered. "All right, I'm going to have another beer, and if my horse isn't back outside by the time I finish, I'm going to do what I did in Texas, and I don't like to have to do what I did in Texas." Some of the locals shifted restlessly. The man, true to his word, had another beer, walked outside, and his horse had been returned to the post. He saddled up and started to ride out of town. The bartender wandered out of the bar and asked, "Say, partner, before you go, what happened in Texas?" The cowboy turned back and said, "I had to walk home." The Englishman's wife steps up to the tee, and as she bends over to place her ball, a gust of wind blows her skirt up and reveals her lack of underwear. "Good God, woman, why aren't you wearing any knickers?" her husband demanded. "Well, you don't give me enough housekeeping money to afford any." The Englishman immediately reaches into his pocket and says, "For the sake of decency, here's 30 pounds. Go and buy yourself some underwear." Next, the Irishman's wife bends over to set her ball on the tee. Her skirt also blows up to show that she is wearing no undies. "Blessed Virgin Mary, woman, you've no knickers. Why not?" She replies, "I can't afford any on the money you give me." He reaches into his pocket and says, "For the sake of decency, here's 20 pounds. Go and buy yourself some underwear." Lastly, the Scotsman's wife bends over. The wind also takes her skirt over her head to reveal that she too is naked under it. "Sweet mother of Jesus, Aggie, where the frig are your drawers?" She too explains, "You didn't give me enough money to be able to afford any." The Scotsman reaches into his pocket and says, "Well, for the love of Jesus and the sake of decency, here's a comb. Tidy yourself up a bit." Towards the end of a round of golf, Dave hit his ball into the woods and found it in a patch of pretty yellow buttercups. Trying to get his ball back in play, he ended up thrashing just about every buttercup in the patch. All of a sudden, poof! In a flash and puff of smoke, a little old woman appeared. She said, "I'm Mother Nature. Do you know how long it took me to make those buttercups? Just for doing what you have done, you won't have any butter for your popcorn for the rest of your life. Better still, you won't have any butter for your toast for the rest of your life. As a matter of fact, you'll never have any butter for anything for the rest of your life." Then poof, she was gone. After Dave recovered from the shock, he hollered for his friend, "Fred, where are you?" Fred yells back, "I'm over here in the Pussy Willows." Dave shouts back, "Don't swing, Fred! For the love of God, don't swing!" Once upon a time, there were these twin brothers named Jon and Bill Jones. Jon was happily married to a beautiful woman, and Bill was the proud owner of a dilapidated rowboat. One day, Jon's wife up and died. And on that same day, Bill's boat sank. A couple of days later, an old lady walks up to Bill, thinking he was Jon, and said, "Mr. Jones, I am so sorry for your loss. You must be really sad." To this, Bill replied, "I'm not the least bit sorry. She was a rotten thing right from the start. She had a crack in the back and a pretty big hole in the front, and she smelled of dead fish. I got so I could handle her okay, but if I let anyone else use her, she would leak like anything. The hole in front kept getting bigger and bigger, and she would take on water pretty quickly. But this is what finished her. 4 guys from out of town were looking for a good time and asked me if I would rent her out to them. I told them what she was like, but they didn't care. The problem was they all tried to get into her at once, and that caused her to split right up the middle." The old lady fainted on the spot. Baby Bear goes downstairs and sits in his small chair at the table. He looks into his small bowl. It is empty. "Who's been eating my porridge?" he squeaks. Papa Bear arrives at the big table and sits in his big chair. He looks into his big bowl, and it is also empty. "Who's been eating my porridge?" he roars. Mama Bear puts her head through the serving hatch from the kitchen and yells, For Christ's sake, how many times do we have to go through this with you idiots? It was Mama Bear who got up first. It was Mama Bear who woke everyone in the house. It was Mama Bear who made the coffee. It was Mama Bear who unloaded the dishwasher from last night and put everything away. It was Mama Bear who went out in the cold early morning air to fetch the newspaper. It was Mama Bear who set the damn table. And it was Mama Bear who put the friggin' cat out, cleaned the litter box, and filled the cat's water and food dish. And now that you've decided to drag your sorry bear asses downstairs and grace Mama Bear's kitchen with your grumpy presence, listen good, because I'm only going to say this one more time. I haven't made the feckin' porridge yet. An elderly couple were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary, so they decided to return to the little town where they first met. They sat in a small coffee shop in the town and were telling the waitress about their love for each other and how they met at this same spot. Sitting next to them was the local cop, and he smiled as the old couple spoke. After the waitress left the table, the old man said to his wife, "Remember the first time we made love? It was up in that field across the road when I put you against the fence. Why don't we do it again for old time's sake?" The wife giggled like crazy and said, "Sure, why not?" So off they went out the door and across to the field. The cop smiled to himself, thinking how romantic this was, and decided he better keep an eye on the couple, so they didn't run into any harm. The old couple walked to the field, and as they approached the fence, they began to undress. The old man picked up his wife when they were naked and leaned her against the fence. The cop was watching from the bushes and was surprised at what he saw. With the vitality of youth, the wife bounced up and down excitedly, while the husband thrashed around like a wild man, and then they both fell to the ground in exhaustion. Eventually, they stood up, shook themselves, and got dressed. As they walked back towards the road, the cop stepped from his hiding spot and said, "That is the most wonderful lovemaking I have ever seen. You must have been a wild couple when you were young." "Not really," said the old man. "When we were young, that fence wasn't electric." A dwarf with a lisp goes into a stud farm. "I'd like to buy a horse," he says to the owner of the farm. "What sort of horse?" said the owner. "A female horse," the dwarf replies. So the owner shows him a mare. "Nice horse," says the dwarf. "Can I see her eyes?" So the owner picks up the dwarf to show him the horse's eyes. "Nay, the eyeth," says the dwarf. "Can I see her teeth?" Again, the owner picks up the dwarf to show him the horse's teeth. "Nice teeth! Can I see her birth?" the dwarf says. By now the owner is getting a little fed up, but again picks up the dwarf to show him the horse's ears. "Nice earth," he says. "Now, can I see her twat?" With this, the owner picks the dwarf up by the scruff of his neck and shoves his head deep in just under the horse's tail. He holds him there for a couple of seconds before pulling him out and putting him down. The dwarf shakes his head and says, "Perhaps I should weef ways that. Can I see her one awound?" One day in class, the teacher brought a bag full of fruit. "Now, class, I'm going to reach into the bag and describe a piece of fruit, and you tell me what fruit I'm talking about. Okay, first, it's round, plum, and red." Of course, Johnny raised his hand high, but the teacher wisely ignored him and picked Deborah, who promptly answered, "An apple." The teacher replied, "No, Deborah, it's a beet. But I like your thinking. Now for the second. It's soft, fuzzy, and colored red and brownish." Well, Johnny is hopping up and down in his seat trying to get the teacher to call on him, but she skips him again and calls on Billy. "Is it a peach?" Billy asks. "No, Billy, I'm afraid it's a potato, but I like your thinking," the teacher replies. "Here's another. It's long, yellow, and fairly hard." By now, Johnny's about to explode as he waves his hand frantically. The teacher skips him again and calls on Sally. "A banana," she says. "No," the teacher replies. "It's a squash, but I like your thinking." Johnny is kind of irritated now, so he speaks up loudly. "Hey, I've got one for you, teacher. Let me put my hand in my pocket. Okay, I've got it. It's round, hard, and it got a head on it." "Johnny," she cries, "that's disgusting." "Nope," answers Johnny. "It's a quarter, but I like your thinking." Little Red Riding Hood is skipping down the road when she sees the big bad wolf crouched down behind a log. "My, what big eyes you have, Mr. Wolf," says Little Red Riding Hood. The surprised wolf jumps up and runs away. Further down the road, Little Red Riding Hood sees the wolf again. This time he is crouched behind a tree stump. "My, what big ears you have, Mr. Wolf," says Little Red Riding Hood. Again the foiled wolf jumps up and runs away. About 2 miles down the road, Little Red Riding Hood sees the wolf again, this time crouched down behind a road sign. "My, what big teeth you have, Mr. Wolf," taunts Little Red Riding Hood. With that, the big bad wolf jumps up and screams, "Will you get lost? I'm trying to take a dump." Walking down the street, a man hears a voice. "Stop! If you take one more step, a brick will fall down and kill you." The man stopped. A big brick fell in front of him. The astonished man continued walking to the crosswalk. The voice shouted, "Stop! If you take one more step, a car will run over you and you will die." The man stood still. A car came careening around the corner, barely missing him. "Where are you?" the man asked. "Who are you?" "I am your guardian angel," the voice answered. "Oh yeah?" the man asked. "Where were you when I got married last week?" An Irish painter by the name of Murphy, while not a brilliant scholar, was a gifted portrait artist. Over a short number of years, his fame grew, and soon people from all over Ireland were coming to the town of Doolin in County Clare to get him to paint their likenesses. One day, a beautiful young Englishwoman arrived at his house in a stretch limo and asked if he would paint her in the nude. This being the first time anyone had made such a request, he was a bit perturbed, particularly when the woman told him that money was no object. In fact, she was willing to pay up to £10,000. Not wanting to get into any marital strife, he asked her to wait while he went into the house to confer with Mary, his wife. In a few minutes he returned. "'Twould be my pleasure to paint your portrait, missus," he said. "The wife says it's okay. I'll paint you in the nude all right, but I have to at least leave my socks on so I have a place to wipe my paintbrush." There I was at the bar staring at my drink when a large, troublemaking biker steps up next to me, grabs my drink, and gulps it down in one swig. "Well, what you gonna do about it?" he says as I burst into tears. "This is the worst day of my life," I say. "I am a complete failure. I was late for a meeting and the boss fired me. When I went to the parking lot, I found my car had been stolen, and I don't have any insurance. I left my wallet, I took in the cab home, I found my wife with another man, and my dog bit me. So I came to this bar to work up the courage to put an end to it all. I buy a drink, put a capsule in, and sit here watching the poison dissolve, and then you show up and drink the whole thing. But enough about me, how's your day going?" A homeless guy is traveling down a country lane. Tired and hungry, he comes across a pub called the George and the Dragon. Although it's late and the pub is closed, he knocks on the door. The innkeeper's wife sticks her head out a window. "Could I have some food?" he asks. The woman glances at his shabby clothes and obviously poor condition and sternly says, "No." "Any chance of a pint of ale, then?" "No," she says again. "Could I at least sleep in your barn?" "No." By this time, she was clearly getting very annoyed. The down-and-out says, "Okay, then, might I please?" "What now?" the woman interrupts impatiently. "Might I please have a word with George?" A drunk gets up from the bar and heads for the bathroom. A few minutes later, a loud, blood-curdling scream is heard coming from the bathroom. A few minutes after that, another loud scream echoes through the bar. The bartender goes into the bathroom to investigate what the drunk is screaming about. The bartender yells, "What's all the screaming about in there? You're scaring my customers." The drunk responds, "I'm just sitting here on the toilet, and every time I try to flush, something comes up and squeezes the hell out of my balls." The bartender opens the door and looks in. "You idiot, you're sitting on the mop bucket." Young preacher Nathan was sitting in a cafe eating his lunch. He opened an envelope he'd just received that morning from his mother and found that she had included a 10-pound note. He thought to himself, "Thanks, Mum. I am sure that will come in handy." Nathan finished his food, and as he left the cafe, he saw a beggar leaning against the wall. Deciding the poor man could probably needed the money more than he did, He crossed out the name and address on the envelope, and across the top in large letters wrote, "Persevere." So as to be discreet, he put the envelope under his arm and dropped it as he walked past the man. The poor man picked it up and read the message and smiled. The next day, as Nathan was enjoying his meal, the beggar tapped him on the shoulder and handed him a big wad of money. Surprised, the young preacher asked him what that was for. The man replied, "This is your half of the winnings. Persevere came in first and paid 35 to 1. One night, an old man and a strange woman were getting a bit intimate. As he undressed her, bent her over, and leaned in, he paused and said with surprise, "Hey, why is there not a single hair back here?" The woman rolled her eyes and replied, "Are you here to do your job or to open a salon?" In the dead of summer, a fly was resting on a leaf beside a lake. The hot, dry fly, who said to no one in particular, "Gosh, if I go down 3 inches, I will feel the mist from the water, and I will be refreshed." There was a fish in the water thinking, "Gosh, if that fly goes down 3 inches, I can eat him." There was a bear on the shore thinking, "Gah, if that fly goes down 3 inches, that fish will jump for the fly, and I will grab him." It also happened that a hunter was farther up the bank of the lake preparing to eat a cheese sandwich. "Gosh," he thought, "if that fly goes down 3 inches and that fish leaps for it, that bear will expose himself and grab for the fish. I'll shoot the bear and have a proper lunch." Now, you probably think this is enough activity on one bank of a lake, but I can tell you there's more. A wee mouse by the hunter's foot was thinking, "Gosh, if that fly goes down 3 inches, and that fish jumps for that fly, and that bear grabs for that fish, the dumb hunter will shoot the bear and drop his cheese sandwich." A cat lurking in the bushes took in this scene and thought, as was fashionable to do on the banks of this particular lake around lunchtime, "Gosh, if that fly goes down 3 inches, and that fish jumps for that fly, and that bear grabs for that fish, and that hunter shoots that bear, and that mouse makes off with the cheese sandwich, then I can have that mouse for lunch." The poor fly is finally so hot and so dry that he heads down for the cooling mist of the water. The fish swallows the fly. The bear grabs the fish. The hunter shoots the bear. The mouse grabs the cheese sandwich. The cat jumps for the mouse. The mouse ducks. The cat falls into the water and drowns. The moral of the story is whenever a fly goes down 3 inches, some pussy is in serious danger. A pensioner drove his brand-new Mercedes to 100 miles per hour. Looking in his rear-view mirror, he saw a police car behind him. He floored it to 140, then 150, then 155. Suddenly he thought, "I'm too old for this nonsense." So he pulled over to the side of the road and waited for the police car to catch up with him. The officer walked up to him, looked at his watch, and said, "Sir, my shift ends in 10 minutes. Today is Friday, and I'm taking off for the weekend with my family. If you can give me a good reason that I've never heard before why you were speeding, I'll let you go." The man looked very seriously at the policeman and replied, "Years ago, my wife ran off with a policeman. I thought you were bringing her back." The cop left saying, "Have a good day, sir." Doctor was addressing a meeting about healthy eating. "The material we put into our stomachs is enough to have killed most of us sitting here years ago. Red meat is awful. Soft drinks corrode the stomach lining. Some Asian foods contain high levels of MSG. High-fat diets are harmful, and long-term damage is caused by the germs in our drinking water. But there is one thing that is the most dangerous, and most of us have or will eat it. Can anyone tell me what food is it that causes the most grief and suffering for years after eating it?" After a short pause, an elderly man in the front row put up his hand and softly said, "Wedding cake." A retired gentleman walks into the Social Security office to apply for benefits. The clerk behind the desk asks, "Sir, can I see your driver's license to verify your age?" The man pats his pockets and realizes he left his wallet at home. "Oh, no," he sighs. "I'll have to go back and get it." The clerk waves him off. "No need, just unbutton your shirt." Confused but obliging, the man opens his shirt, revealing a chest full of curly silver hair. She nods. That's proof enough for me. She processes his application on the spot. Excited, the man rushes home to tell his wife. Honey, you won't believe it. I forgot my ID, but the clerk saw my gray chest hair and approved me right away. His wife smirks. You should have dropped your pants. You might have qualified for disability, too. A man suspects his wife is cheating, so one day he comes home early. As soon as he steps inside, she meets him at the door, wrapped in a bathrobe, her hair a mess. Where is he? He shouts. Where's the guy you've been sneaking around with? She gasps. I don't know what you're talking about. Not convinced, he tears through the house, checking under the bed, inside the closets, and even behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Then from the kitchen window, he spots a guy just sitting in a Volkswagen parked outside. His eyes narrow. Aha! That must be him. Blinded by rage, he grabs the refrigerator, lifts it with all his strength, and hurls it out the window. The effort is too much. His heart gives out, and he collapses dead. Up at the pearly gates, St. Peter looks at him and asks, What are you doing here? The man sighs. Well, I knew my wife was cheating, so I came home early, saw the guy in the Volkswagen, threw a fridge at him, and had a heart attack. St. Peter shakes his head. Yeah, that was a bit much. Off to hell you go. He pulls a lever, a trap door opens, and the guy vanishes. Minutes later, another man arrives at the gates. St. Peter asks, And what are you doing here? The guy looks confused. I don't know. I was just sitting in my Volkswagen minding my own business when suddenly, bam! A refrigerator crushes me. St. Peter frowns. Oh, you poor guy. But still, you were involved in all that mess. Off to hell with you. Pulls the lever. A few minutes pass, and a third guy stumbles up to the gates, dazed. St. Peter sighs. All right, what's your story? The guy blinks and says, Honestly, I have no idea. 1 minute, I'm chilling in a refrigerator. The next, I'm here. Billy Bob and Luther were chatting one afternoon when Billy Bob said, Buddy, I think it's time for a vacation. But this year, I'm doing things differently. Every time I took your advice, things got a little complicated. How so? Luther asked. Well, 3 years ago, you told me to go to Hawaii. Erline got pregnant. 2 years ago, you said the Bahamas. Erline got pregnant again. Last year, you suggested Tahiti. Guess what? Erline got pregnant again. Luther shook his head and asked, So what's the plan this year? Billy Bob grinned. This time, I'm taking Erline with me. The local sheriff was hiring a deputy, so Gomer, who wasn't exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, decided to apply. Sheriff. All right, Gomer, what's 1 and 1? Gomer. 11. The sheriff scratched his head. Not what I expected, but technically right. Sheriff. Which 2 days of the week start with these? Gomer. Today and tomorrow. The sheriff nodded. Didn't see that coming, but can't argue with it. Sheriff. All right, Gomer. Who killed Abraham Lincoln? Gomer thought long and hard before saying, I don't know. The sheriff sighed. Well, go home and think on that one. Later at the pool hall, Gomer's buddies asked how it went. Gomer grinned. It went great. First day on the job, and I'm already working a murder case. A woman goes to her boyfriend's parents' house for Christmas dinner, her first time meeting the family. She's super nervous, but everything seems to be going well. Until the broccoli casserole kicks in. Feeling the pressure, literally, she lets out a tiny, dainty fart. It's not loud, but it's definitely heard. Before she can panic, her boyfriend's dad glances under the table at their dog and says, Skippy! Relieved, she grins. They think it's the dog. Perfect. A few minutes later, the pressure builds again. This time, she lets out a longer, louder one. The dad frowns at the dog. Skippy! Now she's feeling bold. A few minutes later, she lets one rip that could wake the neighbors. The dad slams his fork down and yells, Skippy, get away from her before she craps on you. Airman Jones was assigned to the induction center where he briefed new recruits about their government benefits, especially GI insurance. Before long, Captain Smith noticed something unusual. Jones was selling insurance to almost every single recruit. Curious, the captain decided to observe one of his briefings. Jones started off explaining the basics of GI insurance. then dropped this gem. If you have GI insurance and go into battle and get killed, the government pays your family $200,000. If you don't have GI insurance and get killed, they only pay $6,000. Then with a serious look, he asked, "Now, which group do you think they're going to send into battle first?" Let's just say he made a lot of sales that day. The Navy realized they had too many officers, so they came up with a special early retirement bonus, $1,000 for every inch measured in a straight line between any 2 points on their body. First officer steps up and says, "Measure me from the top of my head to my toes." Result, 6 feet equals sign, $72,000. Not bad. The second officer gets clever. "Measure from my fingertips to my toes." Boom! 8 feet equals sign, $96,000, even better. Then comes a grizzled old chief. When asked where he wants to be measured, he smirks and says, "From the tip of my weenie to my..." The pension officer tries to talk him out of it, but the chief insists. A medical officer arrives to take the measurement. The chief drops his pants and the doc starts measuring, then suddenly stops and says, "Chief, where are your ankles?" The chief calmly replies, "Vietnam." 3 women and 3 men are traveling by train to a conference. At the station, the 3 men each buy tickets and watch as the 3 women buy only a single ticket. "How are 3 people going to travel on only 1 ticket?" asks one of the guys. "Watch and you'll see," answers a woman. All of them board the train. The men take their respective seats, but all 3 women cram into a restroom and close the door behind them. Shortly after the train has departed, the conductor comes around, collecting tickets. He knocks on the restroom door and says, "Ticket, please." The door opens just a crack, and a single arm emerges with a ticket in hand. The conductor takes it and moves on. The men saw this and agreed it was a clever idea. So after the conference, the men decide to copy the women on the return trip and save some money. When they get to the station, they buy a single ticket for the return trip. To their astonishment, the women don't buy a ticket at all. "How are you going to travel without a ticket?" says one of the perplexed men. "Watch and you'll see," is the answer. When they board the train, the 3 men cram into a restroom, and the 3 women cram into another one nearby. The train departs. Shortly afterwards, one of the women leaves her restroom and walks over to the restroom where the men are hiding. She knocks on the door and says in a low voice, "Ticket, please." One November afternoon when my daughter was in kindergarten, I picked her up after school. She bobbed out to the car and crawled into the back seat. "What did you do today?" I asked. She couldn't wait to tell me. "We learned that boys are different from girls," she chirped. Looking into the rearview mirror, I could just see the top of her head. "My teacher told us that boys have a thing and girls don't," she added. "Well, yes, they do," I said cautiously. I couldn't think of anything else to say, so we were quiet for a moment. Then she piped up again. "That's how girls know that boys are boys," she said. "They see that thing that hangs down, and they know that he is a boy." I mentally calculated the distance home. Our 5-minute commute already felt like an hour. "Did you know that when the boys see a girl, they puff up?" she asked. My palms were beginning to sweat. Well, I was still searching for something new to say, to change the subject when she asked, "Why do the girls like the boys to have those things?" Well, I didn't know what to say. I mean, what woman hasn't asked herself that question at least once? "Oh, well, I stammered. She didn't wait for my answer. She had her own. "It's 'cause it moves when they walk, and then the girls see that, and that's when they know they are boys, and that's when they like them. Then the boy sees the girl, and he puffs up, and then the girl knows he likes her too, and then they get married, and then they get cooked." That last part confused me a bit, but on the whole, I thought she had a pretty good grasp on things. As soon as we got home and I pulled into the garage, she hopped out of the car, fishing something out of her school bag. "I drew a picture," she said. "Do you want to see?" I wasn't sure I did, but I looked at it anyway. I had to sit down. There, all puffed up, so to speak, looking mighty attractive for the ladies, was a crayon drawing of a great big Tom turkey. His snood, The thing that hangs down over his beak, the thing that female turkeys find so irresistible, was magnificent. His tail feathers were standing tall and proud. She was a little offended that I laughed so hard at her drawing, and I laughed until I cried. But when I told her I loved it, and I did, she got over her pique. That was the end of that for her, anyway. But I'm not so lucky. Every year, I remember that conversation. And to be honest, I haven't looked at a turkey or a man the same way since.